Awesome. Well, we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and call the meeting to order. So it is 6:30, January 20th, first meeting of 2022. Very exciting. So we can just go ahead and get started with roll call. Kevin, if you want to take it away.
Sure, Director Bajaj. That's a no. Director Chow. Director Racy.
Here.
Director Sethi.
Here.
And Director Wislowski.
Here.
So that's everyone except for Director Bajaj.
Awesome. Okay. So if we want to move on to item number 2, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. We only have one member of the public. Jenny, if you have any comments.
Just Happy New Year. Take care of yourselves, and it's good to see you all back here.
Awesome. Okay, great. Then we can move on to our consent items. Item number 3. Kevin, if you want to go ahead and share your screen for the consent items.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Does anyone have a second?
I can second.
Awesome. Okay, so that's Director Wasilowski with the motion and Director Sethi with the second. We can just go ahead and vote on them then, since the motion is on the floor.
Director Chow. I had a hard time hearing that one.
Yes.
Director Racy.
Yes.
Director Sethi.
Yes.
And Director Wislowski.
Yes.
Awesome. That passes unanimously. We will go ahead and move on to item number 4, the information and discussion items, starting with the general manager's report.
All right, let me just zoom down to the item there, take a look at it. The pool operated as normal. We had no closures. We did have a minor repair, so that was good. In terms of the work plan, we are still late on some of the ethics training and sexual harassment training. So if you have not done that, please do. Also on that note, there's going to be a Form 700 coming out, which I will email you about very soon. The site master plan is on hold. There's going to be a review by an architect, I believe. Unfortunately, that person got sick, and so waiting for that to start up again. New and amended policies are on time. Year-end close for the audit is done. Electronic AP still on time. Work plan, the winter work plan is started again. So the winter work plan again is everything that we've learned from last summer. We make a list of changes and then we implement those changes over the winter. We put that on hold to work on the electronic payment system, and that electronic payment system stopped. So we kind of flipped and started work on the winter work plan instead of the electronic payments. So electronic payments is a board agenda item, so I'll wait until that to go into detail.
Awesome. So just as a reminder, we don't need to take any action on this, just information and discussion. But as Kevin mentioned, there is an update on the PerfectMind contract, so we can move on to item number 5, starting with that update on the contract. And Kevin, if you want to give the status on that. You're muted, by the way.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. So on June 10th, the board completed a strategic plan. And part of that was identifying that we needed to have an easy to use electronic registration system. And so in furtherance of that goal, staff went ahead and took a look at a whole bunch of different software platforms, identified one that was cheaper than the other one, and the board delegated authority to enter into a contract on December 9th. The plan was to get that contract signed and ready, and then work would begin the first week of January. And this would have given enough time for staff to implement everything and to be able to roll out in time for summer lessons. So we would have done spring lessons under the old systems and summer lessons under the new systems. Unfortunately, there was a few complications. It turns out that PerfectMind, being a Canadian company, presented some obstacles, some of which were that their contract called for the contract to be governed by Canadian law, which our legal representatives aren't really well versed in. Then there was some other issues like where is the data stored? We would have to go through a data security review and some other items. Now, none of these items are deal breakers. They're totally workable. PerfectMind was willing to work on these and even potentially use American law potentially. The problem was that all of these would take time that we didn't have. The timeline was just too tight already. And basically that key staff who got sick, me, that really basically threw the entire timeline out the window. It was just not good. So because of that, we had a choice to make, and the risk of being late on this is that the platform wouldn't be ready by summer lessons. And so we would either have a rushed and sloppy rollout, or we'd be paying for both systems at once while using the old systems. So both of those are really bad outcomes. And so I had to make the executive decision that we would just have to delay the project until the fall. That is bad because we are going to have to use our old systems. The good news is that everyone's already used to these systems, so it won't be any different from what we're already doing. There's also a little bit of a kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, which is that we can start the process earlier and actually get started in November so that we can have not just summer lessons, but also spring lessons on the new registration system. And that's a big advantage. That means we get to do a soft rollout with all the spring programs. When the volume is low, we can work out all the kinks and we can provide better training for our staff for the summer of 2023. So it's not the best news, but it's not all bad as well. There's not really a whole lot to be done at this point. I did leave this item on as a action item in case any of the board wanted to propose something, but it's really pretty late to try to implement something at this point. And that's about it. Did anyone have questions?
I just wanted to say it's better to kind of delay it if needed, but because we have finance data, we'll have credit card information stored. It's better to be secure and not risk other people's data.
Good point. Agreed. It's still based on what you've found out so far, Kevin. My question is this objection to it being a Canadian company. Last time you talked to the county about that, it looks like there's a workaround for that from what you just said a couple minutes ago. So
yes,
yeah.
All of these we can work through. We just need time, and we just didn't have that time. So it's kind of unfortunate. One other thing is that we will have to reevaluate the platforms again, only because prices and features change. And so just in case there's any changes, we will have to take a look at both of those again, probably September. So September meeting, we can take a look at whatever platform. And then October, we'll have the entire month of half of September and all of October for legal to work through any kind of issues. And then that would let us begin first week of November on implementing.
Might want to get it a month earlier than that to give legal more time, since they've proved to be a roadblock in the past, time-wise. So just a suggestion of mine.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Not on that.
before we table this until summer, I do want to leave the room open a little bit for any other further discussion or questions from Director Chow or Director Bajaj. If you guys have any thoughts as well, feel free to share, but if not, then we can move on.
Yeah, I think it's probably better to table it for now and see what comes up. Like I said, I don't think it's better to kind of further evaluate rather than rush into anything. It's not fully analyzed.
Yeah, I think we made the right decision here, given everything that's going on. So, I mean, this is probably the best next step we could have done, just given the circumstances. So, you know, it happens. I don't think it's a big deal, but you know, as soon as the summer season finishes, if we can get this implemented, it would be really nice. But the good thing, like you said, is it's not a requirement, and it's, you know, we're already used to our old system. So this will give us another summer of sort of mental preparation, I guess.
And we have silver linings here, which is always a good thing. All right, awesome. If there aren't any other comments or questions, then we can go ahead and move on to item 5B, which is the proposed changes to increases for program fee schedules and class structures, but I'll let Kevin explain that a little bit more.
Great, thank you. So the board in December delegated authority to make a bunch of program changes, but it was all premised on the idea of implementing PerfectMind, and it didn't seem right to still go ahead and do that since PerfectMind wasn't happening. So as a result, I put together a list of what we believe would be the best way to move forward into summer 2022. And that way the board and the public has a chance to comment and potentially make changes before these go live. There's a whole host of changes. So I'll go through bit by bit, and after every section, then I'll just open it up for questions and comments. So for swim lessons, our current pricing is between $1.1 and $1.3 per minute. This is the most appropriate way to evaluate the price of a private swim lesson, because it makes it directly comparable to other competitors as well. We're typically at the very bottom, if not the bottom, the lowest price for private lessons on dollars per minute. And generally, you actually see two different scales of pricing. The pricing for private clubs generally is much higher, between $2 and $3 a minute. And that would be places, well, they're basically private organizations. And there's tons of them everywhere. The YMCA and other nonprofits or not-for-profits generally tend to be much more inexpensive. And from what we've seen in this area, they tend to be about $1.36 to $1.77 a minute, but it depends whether you're a member or a non-member. So I kind of see that as being similar to, it's very similar to resident, non-resident is the way I see it. So as you can see, you know, our price to the public is less than the member price for YMCA. And that's okay, that's all right. We don't need to be the highest, we don't. But because of COVID and some of the other conditions that we've had, our revenue is actually way down. So there's two different ways we could address that. One is a 20-cent per minute increase. And that's about 15 to 18% increase right now. Or the other thing we could do is we could split it out over 2 years. So it'd be a 10-cent per minute increase. Each of these, well, if we did a 20-cent per minute increase, it would be between $20,000 and $30,000 increase over what we would have done without. So it is a very significant increase. Again, it does put a bit more of a burden onto parents. So that's something to keep in mind. Any questions on this one?
And so what we charge by 2-week lessons or 2 weeks of lessons or one, yeah, 2 weeks. So with 20 cents per minute increase immediately, what's the bottom line for buying a set of lessons, go from and to?
It's a $40 increase. So
$40.
right now, if you were a non-resident, which most of our swim lessons are, instead of paying $260 for 8 private lessons, you would pay $300. And for residents, instead of paying $220 for 8 private lessons, you would now pay $260. So it is an increase, and that's if all of it is done this year. If it's spaced out over 2 years, then it would be $20 increase. So instead of $260, it would be $280 for non-residents, and for residents, it would be $240 instead of $220.
Kevin, I don't know, just my opinion. I think if you're going to increase, it's better to just give them one shock instead of spacing it out, because if we do it again next year, then they might come back and say, why did you do it again? You did it last.
Right, that makes sense.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree too. That I think that makes sense. But yeah, I think it would be best to just keep this proposal as is, rather than the alternative of splitting it between the 2 years.
Okay. One thing to note is that all of these, the increase in revenue is for one entire summer, and our accounting is by fiscal year, so it'll be a little weird seeing it. So basically, it would have no effect for our current fiscal year, and any increases we do now, we would see more than a year from now.
I think even more reason to just do it all in one shot.
Okay. All right. Is it okay if I go on to the next one?
Yeah, Director Chauer, Bajaj, do you guys have any comments? Or if not, totally fine, we can move on.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to agree that we should just get it done all at once. Initially, I was thinking splitting it out might be nice if, you know, it went into effect for this summer as well. But like you're saying, if it's for the fiscal year, then I'd rather just do it all at once, because it gives us still a year to, you know, anticipate that price hike, basically.
Oh, no, it would go into effect immediately. I'm just saying that in terms of seeing it on our financial reports, you won't see a change really until next year.
Like, in terms of the revenue, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I still feel like by the time summer rolls around, it's probably going to be fine to just have the price hike all at once. You know, I'm more concerned from the perspective of, you know, prices are obviously increasing for just about everything nowadays, and salaries are not. So that's something that's taking a little bit more time, as it usually does, to happen. So I don't know. I feel like it's still going to be better to do it all at once, given that. But I guess that's my devil's advocate view.
Thank you.
I agree as well. Probably just doing it all at once makes more sense. I think the shock of the, you know, rather than raising it twice, then I think you just do it up front.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll move on to the public swim.
One quick thing, when we do
Yes.
publish the new rates, I think the wording around how we put it is very important. So let's be very careful around how it is worded and why. And I don't know if you publish explanations on why we increase prices. So, but we should be very careful about how we word it.
Right, right.
So that the message should come across that we're doing it this one time, because we've not done it in so long.
Right.
As we did. And
Absolutely.
it's just the one time. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. And we will definitely publish. The last time we did kind of a big increase for a whole bunch of things, we actually posted it, noticed it, and put the reasons why. And I believe the last time we did that was 2013, 2014, something like that. Other than that, we usually do like maybe 1 or 2 prices a year, but not for everything. For public, it's kind of a weird time, honestly. All the costs are increasing, and we're at the same time, we have less people coming in. So it's just a weird time, and there's reasons why we have to do this. Or we don't have to, but we should. the public swim, for this one, basically public swim loses a lot of money, but it's part of Rancho's mission to provide recreation. So it's important, but it does lose money. So a $1 increase for non-residents for public swim day passes will help to defray some of those costs. Not a lot, but some. For now, I think maybe a $1 increase for non-resident public swim is okay. And that would be for non-resident public swim and for the 10 punch pass. And that should generate about $2,500 to $3,500. For now, leaving the resident pricing the same. And then we'll probably leapfrog next year and then suggest potentially doing resident prices next year. But for now, I think non-resident is fine. It's actually not a big portion of the revenue anyway, so it doesn't, and even if we left a $2 gap, it should be fine. The other portion of it is that if possible, we would want to discontinue the family pass temporarily. Essentially, the family pass is for a family of 4, and it allows you, it's basically kind of like a membership. You can just come anytime, not anytime, but during public swim hours and come in. And it's very convenient for families, right? You know, especially ones who come a lot. The problem is a bit of a messaging problem at this point. And what happened is that when we started doing our old public swim used to be 2-month program. And the hours were the same for the entire length of that program, from mid-June through mid-August. It's the same hours, never changed. And so when you bought a family pass, you know, I'm going to get these hours from this date to this date. Now we have a much longer season. The season starts on weekends in May, and it ends weekends in October, and it kind of ramps up and then it ramps back down again. And people are buying these family swim passes in the middle of summer. And the office staff explains that this is really just, you know, it gets you into public swim during the hours, but these hours do ramp down towards the end. But inevitably, people feel kind of cheated when in September they say, how come I can't come on the weekdays? And it's led to more than a few confrontations, very scary confrontations. And yes, and unfortunately, again, it's a messaging thing. I think if we were going to PerfectMind, you know, it would have been a different story. We could have waivers, things like that. We could even print a pass with, you know, a calendar on the back. But PerfectMind is discontinued for now. It is delayed for now. And so we can spend time making a different pass and making all of these different changes. The problem is it's only for one season. So instead, it may be better just to discontinue for one season and have a better solution, better messaging in the fall when we implement the new system. And it might even be possible to do a monthly family pass instead of like the entire summer, which is kind of weird anyway.
Can I make a quick suggestion?
Sure.
Instead of saying discontinuing, just say the family pass is on hold for this year.
You write that down.
What was that?
It just say it's on hold. We're not discontinuing it because we are planning, we might bring it back. So let's just message it as it's being put on hold for this year for now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, once PerfectMind is implemented or whatever system we use, I think that we'll have better opportunity to do monthly passes, which we don't do now just because of the paperwork. And then we could have different pricing, right? You know, if you're going September where it's just weekends, it doesn't make sense to have a pass that costs a lot, right? It could be a lot less. So different opportunities, but we don't have them right now. So any comments, questions, concerns?
So
Oh, go ahead.
the current price for a resident is $5?
Yes. For the day pass, and it would continue to be $5.
So if the issue is people feeling as though they got cheated towards the end of the season, would it be a possibility to like maybe cut off the sale of them like halfway through the season or like a quarter way into the season possibly, rather than like putting it on hold for the entirety of the season? Or would that just not be feasible?
We definitely could. We could do that. That's another solution, sure. Although those people who buy it in the beginning may still feel cheated. The other people who feel cheated are some lap swimmers, because it's very difficult to get lap swim spots for some people. There's kind of tricks on making it work. Like you have to sit there with your phone and like, you know, but if you don't know those tricks, it is actually really hard to get a lap swim spot. So we have had people who are upset about that, and been a little bit difficult, but but I think that's something that will change over time. So.
Okay, well, in that case, I think this is probably just the best solution.
Yeah, I think, you know, instead of, I guess, you know, if we were to have PerfectMind, you know, and everything was running smoothly, then that would take up some time. So I guess we can maybe as a board and also as staff focus on sort of looking at how the family pass could work better in the future, instead as sort of the next project, so to speak. But yeah, I think we can put on hold for this summer and then look at how we can improve it best. Because honestly, and again, I'm trying to have the most sympathy for people who do feel cheated, and it makes sense where, you know, I'm going to the public swim sessions every day, expecting these hours, and it's really basically up to how well we communicate that the hours are going to change towards the end, that will basically decide whether or not they feel like, you know, it was a good purchase for them. So we can do some thinking about the best ways to communicate that, or you know, whether the window should be shorter, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. All right. Well, if there's no other comments, swim camp. So our swim camp, this is a relatively new program. It started only a couple of years ago. And this is, along with swim lessons, it's one of the programs that does make significant revenue or has the potential to. And the price was set a little bit lower to begin with, just because it was a new program. And then it was set even lower because we had to cut out swim lessons. Now, at this point, I think the camp is actually, it's under costed by quite a bit. Currently, it's about $550 for a 2-week camp that runs from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So that's pretty inexpensive. There's public swim, there's crafts, all kinds of stuff. We're not competing with you know, math camps and a lot of that. We're a recreation camp, and that's kind of a rarity these days. Either way, it is under costed, and I think there's room to increase to $800 for a 2-week session. So that's you know, it's $400 a week. I recently learned how expensive childcare is, and so I think that this is still pretty reasonable. And it would, depending on how many attendees there are, it could generate as much as $25,000 in a summer. It depends how many attend. Again, we didn't advertise in December like we were planning because we needed to get authorization for this one. So there may be less attendees this summer, but I think that this pricing makes sense.
I don't know if we still be considered late, because most parents, at least that I interact with, are all in this limbo of what's going to happen, how open we're going to be. Most people have not booked anything.
Oh, that's good. That's good news. Thank you for telling me that. That's very
nobody
reassuring.
knows what's happening, right? So they don't know when it's going to shut down again. So nobody's kind of making any plans. And most parents, in any case, I think this summer enrollment will be lower because most parents are working from home.
Mm.
So that's the other thing we have to keep in mind, that enrollments will probably be lower.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's definitely a relief because I remember our first year we started advertising late and our enrollment was pretty low. So, but that's, it's okay if it's low for a few years. I think it'll recover eventually.
What's the aftercare?
I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. So the camp actually ends a little bit earlier, but some people, especially working parents, they can't get to Rancho until much later in the day. So the aftercare is basically a couple extra hours at the end for parents who need that time to go pick up later so they can finish work. It's really, really cheap if you think about a 2-week camp and getting a few extra hours for $100.
Oh yeah, because I remember paying in some places $5 an hour or $1 a minute for aftercare. It's crazy.
Yeah, so this is very affordable still.
Well, I think it makes sense. But if there are any other comments, feel free.
Okay, I guess we'll go on to swim team. So swim team, by the way, is a very important revenue neutral, more or less, program. And we last changed the price. I'm going to ballpark it. I think it was also 2013, 2014. It was the last time we increased it. So it's been $100 a month for a very, very, very long time. And that was okay because our attendance was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But as you know, attendance in all kinds of sports events has declined quite a bit. And so we kind of got hit by a double whammy of price just never increasing and a team that is much, much, much smaller and people just aren't comfortable packing in and swimming right next to each other like they used to, except in summer, oddly enough. So we have this kind of a two different problems. One is that the team's kind of small, revenue's low. And the second problem is it's very, very small in the winter and very, very big in the summer. And so this seems like it's a good opportunity to switch to more of a peak off-peak system where it's more expensive in the summer and less expensive in the winter, both to incentivize more people to stay on in the winter. They're like, oh, I get a discount. And then also to, I hate to say it, but to discourage people from, overcrowding in the summer. So this would, we're expecting it to bring in about $11,000 to $15,000 additionally, and it should push the swim team back up to being either revenue neutral or perhaps even slightly positive. So, and I think this would be one of those things that we'd probably increase it and then just leave it for another, 6 to 8 years, assuming inflation isn't ridiculous. Any questions on this one? Okay. So the pre-comp, this one is a lot more complicated. Basically, we used to do swim lessons and then kids would go straight on to swim team. And it was an awful transition because, you're doing a 25-minute lesson where you swim one way and then you get some instruction and then you swim the other way and then you stop, you get some instruction. So, you're not really doing that much swimming. And then you go on to swim team where you're literally swimming laps for an hour. And it would wipe kids out. It would wipe kids out. And there were certain skills they didn't have when they joined the swim team, certain vocabulary, for example, like when you're learning swim lessons, you're not going to know what IM is. There's certain skills that you're not going to learn. Like you're not going to want to know how to do a backstroke flip turn or a racing dive. You learn a regular dive, but not a racing dive because you may or may not join swim team. So one of our head coaches many years ago, Nathan Kim, came up with the idea of a pre-comp, something like a little in-between program that would take kids and build them up, build those swim team specific skills and build up endurance. And so the pre-comp is a group of 4 kids, so it's a very small group, and half of it is instruction, where they're learning, very specific swim team moves like racing dives, backstroke flip turns, 2-hand touches for certain strokes, you don't get disqualified, things like that. And then the other half of it was endurance training. So you go from a 25-minute lesson to an hour or 50 minutes, 50, half of which is instruction, half of which is endurance training. And you do that for, it was initially intended to be a 2-week program, but a lot of kids do a month. And it really eased that transition. And the best part is that a lot of times you make friends with the kids on pre-comp, and then you move on to swim team together. And so you go into a new program with some friends. The problem that we ran into is that the eligibility criteria is pretty high. You have to really finish swim lessons, and then you're on pre-comp. And so that pool of candidates is really, really small. And so we just can't offer the program throughout the year. And so a lot of times people are eligible for the program and they just can't get into it. And in the meantime, they find something else to do and never come back. So that was a bit of a problem. And considering it's the one main entryway onto swim team, we have all these barriers to swim team, and our swim team really needs people in it. So what this change is proposing is a couple things. One is lowering those swim team standards. Pre-comp standards. And what that does is there will be a little bit of overlap between our private swim lessons and our pre-comp. And so you could have the choice, if you want to stay doing private lessons if you never intend to go on to swim team, or you could go into pre-comp. And pre-comp then at that point wouldn't be a 2-week to a month program. You probably might stay on there for a few months. Because you're going to be learning more than just advanced technique. You're also going to be learning some level 5, swim lesson skills. You're going to be cleaning up your butterfly. You're going to be, cleaning up your freestyle, doing finger drags, things like that. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap. What that means is that some of our swim lesson revenue is going to be shifted over to pre-comp. It's going to extend the time that people are on the program. But what those two things do is it increases the number of candidates who are eligible. So we can have a bigger, more reliable pre-comp that's pretty much almost available, or at least that's the hope. The other change is that we used to go by the summer schedule, which is 4 days a week. And 4 days a week in the summer is doable for a lot of people. 4 days a week during the school year, not so much. So going down to a 2-day-a-week program by month is what we're thinking. So that way it's kind of like swim team. You pay for the month, you come twice a week. If you miss a day, it's okay, because in an average month, you actually get more lessons than you would if you were to do bi-weekly, like the old method. So if you miss it, it's not a big deal. Usually you get 8 to 10 in a month.
A quick question. Do we allow makeup classes or no?
It just wouldn't be possible because it's a group class.
Got it. Mm.
Yeah. But again, it's kind of a continuous thing, and it's like swim team. If you miss it, some people only go 3 days a week, even though they're paying for 5. So, it is what it is. And of course, using that same peak off peak system for the swim team, we very, very, very deeply cut the price in the winter. So that way it really entices people to stay on the pre-comp and really make that transition to swim team. These are very aggressive, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're very close to break even. If there's 2 people in the class, it's almost break even for some of these pricings. Anyway, that would basically make a really big pre-comp program and hopefully result in more transitions onto the swim team. Doing some kind of a cost analysis on this is very tricky. And the reason is because there's just a ton of variables, right? We're talking about some swim lesson revenue being diverted to pre-comp. How much? We don't know. It depends on how low the standards are taken, right? And maybe that's something that gets adjusted. And then how much of that money is actually recouped or even increased by people staying on the pre-comp longer? I don't know. It depends how successful the program is. And then finally, the very last part is how much of this results in a larger swim team? How many conversions will there be? And how much will that increase the swim team? So these are all, there's just too many things going on all at once to make any solid projection. But I do believe that overall net, it will be it will be a net gain for sure. So in terms of the pricing, currently it's $260 for the public and $220 for residents. It follows the same pricing as swim lessons. It's just double the length, and it's a group class instead of private. It follows the same group format, so anywhere between 2 and 4 students in the proposed monthly program. The pricing would be the same for the summer. It's twice a week for a month, either $260 or $220. Of course, it would be prorated if there's a holiday that interferes or makes it less than eight classes a month. And then, of course, increasing to 4 days a week would be possible in the summer. And of course, it's not just doubling it. There's a little bit of a discount there to kind of encourage people who really want to make it to swim team faster. They can by just taking more lessons. In off season, there's the same type of idea. I don't know whether we would be able to do 3 days a week, but if there are enough people who want to, again, that would be a very big incentive because it's just very cheap for another day. And again, these are very aggressively discounted. So, is there any questions on this?
Quick question: do any of the other schools around have a similar program like the pre-comp?
So the other swim clubs, to my knowledge, what they do is they actually have very low-level swim teams. Right. So the Rancho swim team, you're swimming all 4 strokes. You can dive, you can flip turn. That's a pretty high bar. Some of the other cabana clubs, if you can freestyle, then you can be on swim team. But I mean, as a swimmer, that sounds awful because that means the only thing you're doing is swimming freestyle. It's incredibly boring. And you're going to get these very, very, very young kids, who can barely swim doing freestyle. And it's not something I would recommend doing, but that's also a possibility. I know the coaches are a bit against that because the swimmers who are below a certain standard, it's difficult because now you have a limited space and the differences between the levels are just so extreme. And so you can have, a few lanes, people are doing, really advanced stuff. And then you have lane 1 and you've got one person who's struggling to do backstroke and then like another one butterflying past them. It's very challenging. And so you want to keep the swim team, in my perspective, you want to keep swim team, you want people to be roughly the same level if possible. And that's very difficult when you lower the standards.
No, absolutely. I think I agree with that. The team needs to be the team. Then there's the pre-comp or the classes.
Correct. It is possible to do a separate swim team. But then again, you're going to run into time problems. Like right now, the swim team's really flexible. Parents love it because you can come at 4, you can come at 5, and you can come at 6, and you don't need to tell us in advance. And they love that. But if we did a team A and a team B, then we'd have to set those times. I don't think parents would like that quite as much.
I've had some experiences. So my son, he had swim lessons over the past, at the Rancho pool this past summer. And I do know that I think, I don't know the specifics, but I did know that he couldn't be on the swim team, even though some of his friends were because of, I guess, the degree. Like you said, there's a pretty high bar to make the swim team. So I think in general, if we're proposing that the pre-comp, you just basically, what we're saying is we're going to drop the standards for the pre-comp, or I guess the requirements to join that, but the swim team is going to stay the same. Is that kind of what we're proposing here?
Yes. So the gateway is pre-comp, and pre-comp is so close to swim team standards. It's almost the same. This would really drop the pre-comp standards. So instead of doing private lessons for 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, however long it takes you, you would do pre-comp instead as an option. You don't have to, but you can. And I think for a lot of kids, that's going to be helpful for them. Particularly, I don't know if your son was doing probably butterfly, I assume. Butterfly is very strength oriented. And I mean, technique is obviously very important too. And the more technique you have, the better you are at it, the less strength you actually need. But most people don't start off with great technique. So strength is where it's at. And it's hard to build that up when you're doing, 25-minute lessons. So I think there's a good argument to be made that some students may even benefit more from pre-comp because they're going to have a little bit more of that stamina-based swimming that's going to build up, the upper body strength to be able to do the butterfly. So it may even help for some students, depending on what's holding them back to get into the next level. but everyone's different. The people who are more struggling with technique may benefit more from private lessons.
I think it's, you know, from what I'm hearing, probably a good idea. I feel like if you're opening it up to more potential kids, then I think it's a good thing, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm potentially for it. Just in my experience with kind of, you know, how my sons interacted with Rancho Pool, and if it's opening up to more kids in general, I think it's a good thing. So.
And I think so too, because no kid can build up a lot of stamina in 2 weeks. You need longer to build stamina. So the longer the program, the better it is, the more it benefits.
Yeah, I agree. I think the endurance training is especially important too, because then if, you know, the kid is just like, I hate this, I don't want to do this is too much work. Like, it's better that they make that decision during pre-comp than once they're on the team. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think this is great.
Thank you. Is there any other comment?
Steve, you're really quiet today.
Yeah. It amazes me how fast these kids can learn all these different strokes and become on a swim team, because it just seems like Kevin Chow's got more experience watching his kid go through it. You know, I've never had a kid learn to swim. I don't remember learning to swim. It was so long ago, and I was never on a team. So I think that we're coming up with different ways to get to swim team, and then starting to charge something more like what it's really worth. So, you know, these changes are long overdue if they're affordable, you know, to those who want to use our programs. Again, in this COVID thing, it's been really hard to see how you can squeeze enough people into to actually make any money at all. You know, I was signing the checks all this time. I'm going, God, the cost of gas and electricity is going up, and everything else. And I'm worried that we would price ourselves out of existence. You know, if we were trying to break even. Luckily, there's tax revenue to cover half the cost. You know, so, but we'll see. I mean, it's worth it. I'm glad to hear other people give their opinions for a change, because when I was running the meetings last year, it seemed like I was the only one talking. So that's why I'm being quiet. But thanks for asking.
We appreciate the experience.
Just to quickly interject, I think our budget for this year is showing us being more or less revenue neutral this year. So I think these changes will actually push us back into being positive, not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year. We should see, if these changes are adopted, I think we should see a healthy revenue return. So that's a good thing.
Certainly hope so. You know.
Okay, well, if there's no other comments, then we can go ahead and open the floor for motions to approve the changes. Just as a reminder, if you do wish to propose an alternative, specifically for the first one of splitting the increase between the 2 years, then you would just specify that in the motion. But based on our discussion, it seems like everyone's in favor of just increasing now. So if there are any motions, I'll open the floor for that now.
I can make the motion.
Okay, Director Sethi made the motion to approve these changes. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Director Wesolowski. With that, we can go ahead and vote. Kevin, you can go ahead and do the.
Director Bajaj,
Yes.
Director Chow,
Yes.
Director Racy,
Yes.
Director Sethi,
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yes, with instead of discontinued, with the on hold for the family pass. That's it.
All right, Director Wisłowski.
Yes.
Right.
Perfect. This passes unanimously. And we'll move on to our final item of adjourning. I'll go ahead. Oh, Steve, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I've got a comment. I wanted to bring this up this month to two things for consideration. One is next month we could have it on the agenda if we needed it, but Santa Clara County Special Districts Association, which I've been chairing for the last 5 or so years, whatever it is going to need a representative when I leave the board in November, December, whatever it is. And so I started thinking about that. I mentioned it to Kevin before the meeting. And then the other thing is to keep an eye out for a possible person to encourage to run to take my seat, since I'm not running for reelection in the fall. So I just wanted to bring those two up, even though they aren't technically on the agenda, but to plant in something in your brain. Hopefully by the time I leave, before the time I leave, I'll be able to stop signing checks, but we're working on that. But that's all I had. I was going to bring up the fact that when we were back at the first item on the agenda, the consent agenda, I'm not sure that our balance sheets really tell me much, since they say we have back up to the balance sheet page bottom real quick. I had a question on that. Yeah, no, one more. Yeah, now on the bottom half of this page, I noticed that the flip up to the bottom half, here at the top half. Yeah, that the let's see. No, further down, profit and loss. I noticed some numbers were identically the same, and it didn't seem like they should be. Like our depreciation, I guess it was. I'm not sure I find the accrual basis easier to understand, but some numbers just didn't change from last year to this year at all.
Are you talking about the balance sheet?
Yeah, the balance sheet.
Oh, whoops! I went past it. This one?
There we go. Yeah. Equity didn't change from last year to this year. Net equipment.
These are month to month. It's October and September.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's actually another financial statement called a cash flow statement. Frankly, it's really confusing. So instead, we did a column for the prior month to show cash inflows and outflows. Just so it's a little bit easier to see, our current assets, it looks like $15,000 came out of that, right? So that shows what happened between months. Whereas the cash flow statement, it kind of combines different elements, and to me anyway, it's really confusing. So
Okay.
this is an alternative.
All right. Okay.
Uh,
Well, it's good to see assets are going down as slowly as they seem to be.
Yes. But this is something, again, I think we talked a little bit last year about perhaps an ad hoc committee to take a look at the financial reports. That would be something that the ad hoc committee could look into and see whether there's a better or different way to present the information that's easier to understand. So but that's for another meeting.
Right. I just wondered if I was the only one who got confused on that. Thank you. Answers my question. I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say, are there any objections to adjourning? All right, awesome. We can go ahead and enjoy the rest of our nights. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your evening and for participating and sharing all of your thoughts. And here's to hopefully a very good 2022, a great year to come.
Stay healthy,
Stay
as
healthy.
best